Hi, and welcome back. We're on part two here of Background to the Murder as we introduce the Holocaust in our new unit here. Realistically, what we looked at in part one is we really looked at Jewish culture, Jewish traditions, and the background of the Jewish or Hebrew people. And we did that because that's going to help kind of make us identify with the group here that's going to be targeted in the Holocaust. In part two, we're going to focus more on Adolf Hitler and Nazism and really what that means for the start of the Holocaust. So let's plow into this. So Adolf Hitler really is the instigator of all of this. Adolf Hitler's beliefs, his anti-Semitism, and his power are what's going to make the Holocaust all possible. So let's talk about the rise of Adolf Hitler and Nazism. So Germany had been hit hard by the Depression. A little bit of history here. We know that in the 1920s and 1930s, the decades that followed World War I, Germany had to pay reparations, they had to disarm, they had to lose property, and then you have this Great Depression, which wasn't an American depression, it was a worldwide depression, which really hit Germany hard. So Hitler came to power, and when he did so, he promised to return Germany to its former glory. And actually, in the next set of notes, we're going to look at his promises pretty closely. But one of the promises that he offers is that he's going to rid really all of Europe of what he considered to be the Jewish problem. And so he's definitely got a mind for this, as he's coming to power in Germany. So he promised to get rid of the Jews. Fact, in times of need, people will follow those who will lead. Hitler delivered on his promises, and this made him very popular. When people are down on their luck, when they don't have money, when their survival looks like it could be in jeopardy, and somebody steps up and says, I'm going to get you there, I'm going to help you, here's the things I'm going to offer to you. History has shown that people listen to those kind of people. And why not? Why shouldn't you? And Hitler promised a lot of things. Like I said, we're going to talk about this a little bit later, but he promises to give people jobs. He promises to rebuild infrastructure. He promises to return Germany to its former glory, and he delivers on all of those. So it would be very easy to fall in line and certainly support a guy like Hitler. But the Jewish piece is going to be one that a lot of people sort of ignored or didn't really know what he had in store later on. So why did Hitler hate the Jewish people? When we look at this whole Holocaust, this is a very easy question to ask, but not a real easy question to answer. The answer is very unclear. There are many theories out there, but no clear answer as to why he hated the Jewish people. Some people said he's using them as a scapegoat to be able to clear land and take more property in Europe. There have been some theories that said that his father was part Jewish and he hated his father, and so he wanted to exterminate the Jews because of that. There's no clear reason as to why Hitler hated the Jewish people, but I want you to know that he was not alone. Anti-Semitism absolutely existed within the hearts of many different Europeans. So we do know that Hitler eventually did use the Jews as a scapegoat to strengthen his own power. Basically blamed a lot of the problems of the Depression, blamed the end of World War I on the Jews to kind of make a common enemy so that the people of Germany could unite against them. Now, there's no doubt in the terms of the rise of Adolf Hitler, we have to talk about the Treaty of Versailles. So Hitler was outraged by the end of World War I. He felt Germany could still fight. The Treaty of Versailles ended World War I. It was signed in the Palace of Versailles, which was built by Louis XIV of the Bourbon dynasty in France. And so this really sort of is the trigger event, because if things had happened a little bit differently, if Germany had been properly punished at the end of World War I, maybe Hitler wouldn't have been so angry and wouldn't have been as willing to start a second World War. But the Allied powers definitely punished Germany for what they did in World War I. They didn't start the war, but they became the main aggressor. They lost land, they had to disarm, they had to pay reparations. A lot of different punishing effects came out of the Treaty of Versailles. So the Treaty of Versailles fueled Hitler's motivation to create a new German empire, which he would call the Third Reich, and he started World War II in September of 1939 when he invaded Poland. In terms of the Treaty of Versailles, you can see here The Rhineland for sure was a demilitarized zone, land that was lost by Germany. This is good manufacturing land, land over here, territory that was lost by Germany during World War I. And so it may not look like much to you on a map, but this is pretty significant land that Germany was losing. So just a look at the terms of the Treaty of Versailles. So how do the Nazis factor in? Who are the Nazis? What is Nazism? Let's try to figure out what this is all about. So Hitler rose to power through the Nationalist Socialist Party in Germany. Just like we have political parties here in the United States, the National Socialist Party was a political party in Germany. But they became known as the Nazis. And just like anything else, they're not inherently evil as a political party. It's what they do with their power that makes them evil. And so much of that revolves around starting World War II and, of course, killing people in the Holocaust. So through elections, Hitler and the Nazis took power in Germany. When President Paul von Hindenburg died, Hitler was next in line and became Der Führer, or the leader. Basically, Hitler had been elected as Chancellor in Germany, and because of the burning down of the Reichstag and passing laws that passed power on to him, once Paul von Hindenburg died, Hitler was the number one leader in Germany and sort of manipulated the system to give himself more power. So anti-Semitism absolutely factors into this. Hitler was not the only person in Europe that disliked the Jews. Anti-Semitism existed within a lot of people in and around Germany. And to understand really what this all is, we have to really understand that anti-Semitism is that prejudice or hatred of Jews. So Hitler began passing laws stripping Jews of their citizenship. Germans believed in him, and they believed in these laws. So you might say, well, how are people getting away with this? How are people allowed to pass laws to subjugate another group or take away their rights? Well, when you believe in a man like Hitler that much and you give him that much power, there's not a lot you can do. Hitler was not the kind of guy that you would say no to. Say, hey, Mr. Hitler, no, I don't think we should do this. He would have you removed, locked up, or even killed, of course. So you definitely didn't want to cross or disagree with Hitler. Propaganda was also used to help dehumanize the Jews. It made the Jews look like rapists and deviants and horrible people. And of course, none of that was true, at least on a general level. And so it was very easy for people to dislike the Jews during this time. So in the early days of the Holocaust, Jews were moved from their homes and businesses, and most German people were not upset. This was happening right underneath their noses. They knew about it, and a lot of times they supported it. So most Nazis who rounded up or killed Jews did so out of orders. They were told to, but many did so because they didn't see Jews as humans anymore. So when we watch Schindler's List, you're not going to see Hitler in the movie at all. You're not going to see him killing Jews. You're not going to see him putting them in concentration camps, pulling the trigger, or anything. Most of the Nazis did this because they were told to, but it was very easy for them to do so because they also believed in it. They didn't see the Jews as humans either. So our result of all of this is the Nazis systematically made the Jews the enemy and began removing them to create more Lebensraum, or living space as they called it. So let's get rid of the Jews so we have more room for, natural-blooded Germans. So the final solution, or the decision to exterminate and kill millions of Jews, would not be made for several more years. But through Nazi propaganda and law, life was very dangerous for Jews in Europe by the end of the 1930s.
Okay, let's wrap up our lecture here on background to the murder by taking another look at our constructive response question. The question says, summarize, other than the Holocaust, what other hardships have Jewish people experienced in their existence? Clearly, there are multiple examples that we can refer to that show that throughout history, the Jewish people have been persecuted time and time again. We can go all the way back to ancient Egypt. Now, we did a little background work talking a little bit about Abraham being the father of the Hebrew people. Eventually, the descendants of Abraham moved to Egypt. Egypt is the breadbasket of the world. It's got the Nile. It can grow a lot of food. And they are enslaved for hundreds of years by the Egyptians. Certainly that leads to Moses' story, who leads the Exodus, which is leading the Hebrew people out of slavery. So that's one example. Another example would be during the time of the Romans. You had Roman gods that were worshipped, and the Jews were monotheistic, and so that would often lead to friction and conflict. The Romans actually moved into Jerusalem and destroyed the Jewish temple, only part of which still stands today, and that was very sacred to the Jews. Another historical example that we talked about was Crusaders. When the Crusaders left Europe to travel down to the Holy Lands to reclaim it for Christianity, they slaughtered lots of people, including Jews. Jews were infidels. They were non-believers. They weren't Christians. And so it was seen as okay to kill infidels as long as you were crusading for Christianity, which, of course, violates thou shalt not kill that we talked about in our Middle Ages unit. The last thing we can mention here is just anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is hatred for Jews, and certainly prior to the Holocaust here, it existed in the hearts of a lot of people, especially in Europe. A lot of that's done through propaganda, as you're going to find out in the next lecture, kind of making people dislike the Jews. But none of these examples that we've talked about have the Jews actually, done something to make people angry or upset with them. They've just kind of been that person that you see always getting picked on, but you can't really understand why. Certainly their culture is different, and I think that's a big reason for it, but in terms of instigating or bringing this upon themselves, there really isn't a good historical example for that. So we've got several examples here of why we can see how Jews have been picked on or experienced hardships many different times in their history. So that's going to do it for us here today. Hope you learned something. We'll talk to you next time.